Yeah, what's up, guys? Welcome to the Contractor Commute. We're excited to get into today's episode. There's just kind of been a thought about breaking down bids and like, should you break down bids for customers and things like that? And obviously there's different areas of thought on this topic. I think breaking down a bid can be really scary, like from the contractor's perspective, right? You have, you think customers are going to tear you apart, or they're going to try to get a deal or steal from you, if you give them the level of detail to where like they can really just pick it apart, that kind of thing. And so I think we just wanted to, this has been a kind of a topic that we've talked about for a long time. I heard about from a lot of different people of like, man, how should I structure my bids in the best way to serve customers, but also to protect their construction company. And so I think that's really what we're trying to get into today is just excited to kind of go through a little bit more of the customer's perspective on that, but also just like, how do you tee up your estimates to really be successful? And so, yeah, I'm excited about it. You obviously have a lot of experience in sending out construction bids, to customers. And so I think that's really a lot of the experience that's coming into this episode today. So I'm excited about it.
There's a lot of fear when you send out a bid estimate, however you structure it, that people are just going to use your numbers to just shop you. And so you're putting down tile for $11 a square foot and somebody else is doing it for 10.
Right.
And there's this sort of a price point around things. And I think you guys feel that when you're sending out estimates a lot of times where if you put that level of detail into it, you're not sure if you're arming your customer to just shop you with other bids and then just choose the one that is this basically the lowest price, right?
Yep.
Home Depot versus Lowe's versus Menards. Well, we're going to buy there because it's 3 cents cheaper per board.
Yep.
And I think that mentality kind of, when you have Amazon and other things, the same, whatever you're buying is the exact same brand, model number, et cetera. And all we're doing is shopping price.
Right.
So you go to Amazon and like, hey, they're $2 each cheaper than somewhere else, we'll buy from them. Right. And I think that mentality carries over from the customer's perspective as well. It's like, I'm shopping new flooring. There's 4 places in town. We're choosing the lowest bid.
Yep.
Not realizing there's more distinction beyond just the price point. And so we're going to start today with some kind of boring basics. So stick with us for like 2 minutes just to kind of make sure we're all on the same page. And then we're going to kind of unpack this one in more detail.
I love it.
So let's start with some of the realities of customer perspectives. Okay. And it's sometimes you come into this feeling very frustrated with the customer perspective because it's not yours.
Yeah. You have a different one.
Yes. You feel like you are just working so hard and now the customer comes back with a perspective. And one of them is when they look at numbers like $100 an hour or $120 an hour and they do quick math and say, okay, 2,000 hours a year, $100 an hour, $200,000 a year. I mean, this guy's cleaning up.
Yeah.
I mean, they look at you as though you're retiring off of them. Right. And so that's kind of this mentality the customer brings to a lot of this is the perspective sometimes they see when they see big numbers. They think, wow, this guy is making it. He is cleaning up like a doctor.
Yeah. And a majority of customers, I think we would say, have that perspective. There's obviously other customers who are like after quality, not really as concerned about the cost, involved. Yes. And so that's a little bit of a different perspective, but yes.
At that point, they are shopping for something different than price, right? Yeah,
exactly.
They are looking for and potentially even limiting who they even reach out to based on reputation.
Absolutely.
And so you're using your reputation to get jobs that nobody else can get because they want the best.
Yep. Exactly.
And so if you're in that category, there'll be things that will apply to you here. Yeah. But I think there's the price conscious person. And sometimes these are multi-million-dollar jobs even. Mm-hmm. We've done some big projects where people are still price conscious, kind of comparing line items across these different
Then it's just hundreds of thousands of dollar difference instead of thousands of dollars difference.
Exactly. Instead of little categories. And I think the thing to understand is your customer does not see the behind the scenes unless they're in a similar industry and they have a shared sort of camaraderie. Experience. I have that with people I hire. Right. As a former builder, spend thousands and thousands of hours building things. Yeah. When somebody comes along to do a project for me, I can feel their pain when they come in and say, man, we didn't make any money on that. I'm like, okay, I get where you're coming from. I've done that too.
Yeah.
And so I can sort of see their perspective. Sure. I've made the same mistakes they've made. And so I can see, it's a different perspective. Yeah. But that's not typical. Yeah. Most of the time they're going to look at it and say, they don't see you sourcing material. I had somebody call me.
Or the value in it even.
True. I'll go do the shopping. Mm-hmm. I had somebody call me one time and she was very adamant that she wanted to know precisely when we would be arriving. And this is before I learned about time windows of like, you shouldn't tell somebody we'll be there at 8:30. Why did I learn that lesson the hard way?
Kind of like most lessons.
Yeah, and I'm thinking,
We talked about that a couple weeks ago.
Yes, lessons can, yes, they stick, and there's some pain involved.
Yeah.
So she's saying, well, when are you going to be here? And she's a sweet lady. And she said, when are you going to be here? And I said, well, but typically we show up like 8:30, 9 o'clock. 9:15 we roll in, and she's looking at the clock. Well, you guys are late. And the first thought that came to my mind is I've been up since 5 a.m. and I've been at my office since 6. And all of that was related to her project of like figuring out, this is starting a job. You're sourcing materials and parts for things and getting all of the work orders together for your crew. And I'm thinking, you're working so hard, but that's blind to your customer.
Yeah, your customer doesn't see it.
And it felt very kind of arrogant or like just the wrong response to come along and say, well, I've been up since 5 this morning working on your stupid job. You know what I mean? Like, that's not the way to come across either.
Right.
But I think people are blind to those behind the scenes.
It's
they don't
true.
know that you're working nights and weekends trying to put bids together for people.
They don't know what it takes.
Yeah, they don't know what it takes. And I think there's a certain level of, it shouldn't matter to them either. That's not their job. That's yours.
That's what they're paying you for.
Yeah. And I think they're also, a lot of times, they're shopping for them. They're looking for great work at a low price with, delivered on schedule, under budget.
Yeah, so simple.
I mean, can't everyone do that? They don't understand like even changes to scope as well. I think this is a big one. This happens to us a lot.
Yeah. I think the understanding of what it actually takes to get a job done is like the biggest gap, right? For customers, from customers to contractors. Because it's like, obviously, contractors who are used to building homes, used to remodeling projects, it's linear. They see it start to finish here. This comes next. But customers have no idea. So it's almost like you have to re-educate every customer you get in terms of the actual process. And so I think the not understanding the scope or like why the level of detail in the scope matters so much is a huge gap when it comes to contractors and then the customer's perspective.
There's a certain feeling of overwhelm sometimes that a customer might have, particularly if this is a first project or this is our dream job, where they're gonna. It's very like demanding. We want this done right. We want this done. All of like they're taking a certain level of care to their project, never having done it before. For you, it's. I mean, yes, you want a great quality outcome, but it is a business. Yeah. Then you need to make money. For them, this is our forever home.
Yeah, you had a job before this and after that. It's their one thing for the next 10 years potentially.
Surely take pride in it.
Yeah.
Surely. I mean, I had a guy do some landscaping work for me, and he told me the other day he drove by and he was like, he was taking pride in it. Just like, man, we did a good job, didn't we? You did. Take a bow. You did good. I think we need to accept that the psychology, the perspective of a customer is not the one we have. And we just need to accept it. We need to be content with customers will not see things from our perspective, nor should we necessarily care. They have a perspective, and our role needs to sort of like interface with that perspective. Yeah. You brought up education, like helping them see a different perspective sometimes. Yep. Sometimes that's going to matter, and we're going to talk about that here in ways that really help overcome this breaking down the bid and feeling like this frustration, like you're getting hammered over the head with this bid. Yep. That somebody, hey, you said I'm going to do it for this. I remember hearing from a contractor where he had done a bid, and it was a rather sizable job, over $1 million. And the client he'd done this project for, after the job was all done, was going through line item after line item, comparing what was done to what was in this multi-million-dollar job. And one of the items in there was a $200 bedroom fan. And we did 3 of those, not 4. You owe me $200. And the builder was feeling this frustration of being like, how many things did we throw in that we didn't charge this guy for? And he's going around nickel-diming us at the end of it. And I think that's because of this perspective that deviates in a huge way.
Yeah, it's so true. And the broken down nature of the bid.
Yes.
Initially.
Yes. Yes.
Which is kind of what we're talking about. Yeah.
As we come along as a contractor, dealing with this customer kind of psychology, you come along, you give them a price. Sometimes they just look, they gawk, they're like, they just don't, you charge what for that? Sometimes that's a response. Sometimes they feel like that's reasonable. Yeah. You go down and you break down all of the scope, what's being involved. You have exact costs. I remember doing so many of these where you'd say, we're going to do 912 square feet of this at, $8 a square foot,
Mm-hmm.
or $8.04 per square foot, because we want to be precise.
Yep.
And that included your markup and everything else. And then you get, you put all this care and effort into it, and then your customer kind of assumes that you're kind of almost padding a little bit in there, right? You're going to absorb kind of some deviation,
Right.
some things that might be variables. They're assuming that if the scope changes ever so slightly, that you have them covered,
Right.
And there's really something in the back of a lot of your guys' mind too, where you almost subscribe to that as well. That's a minor change.
True.
I remember a job I was working on, and the customer, very nice lady, came along. She said, hey, "Would you, while you guys are here, would you guys put up the shades?"
Sounds minor.
And I'm thinking, very new, and think, for sure, she'll take care of that. Well, half a day goes by, and we're putting in shades we didn't charge for, and so that kind of thing adds up over time. And you're setting also, you're educating your customer that this is acceptable and this is free.
Yeah.
So
how much
we'll
more
take
can
care
I?
of that,
Yeah.
right? And so now it's
Push
like,
that.
what else? While they're here,
Push the envelope. Yeah.
Can we get more out of these people? And so anyway, we're kind of like educating that piece of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess question is like, what are the important details like for the customer and for the contractor? Like what are the things that actually matter to kind of be a little bit more sharing, I guess, the perspective or being on the same playing field? What would you say to those like perspective? How do we get there?
Yeah. So there's a few things that really, really matter. The number one thing is the scope of work. What's being done? How's it being done? And funny enough, and we talked about some basics, and I think, you guys are all get this. Scope of work is so important. It's like methods also matter too, to bring that into the equation
How
as well.
you're going to do it, basically.
How you're going to, how you're going to be doing it. Like, for instance, are you using nails or screws? Screws take longer to drive than nails with a pneumatic nailer.
Yep.
So distinctions like that need to be pointed out. Well, in some applications, structural screws are going to be stronger than nails. And so distinctions like that need to get pointed out. I had a project we'd done. It's kind of story time today. But a customer had called me up. We had painted an exterior of a home, and quite upset that we had used a sprayer to do part of the trim on the exterior of the home.
Okay.
And he's like, that's never going to be as good as rolling it on with paintbrush and roller. You guys basically took scope away from the job because you used a sprayer, and now he should
owe me money.
Yeah,
basically.
but if that's defined in the original scope and saying we will use this as a method of application, in some instances, if we're going to spray something, that's more work. You got to mask things off, and so I'm
More
educating
prep.
him and saying, well, here's the manufacturer's specifications that sprayed or rolled is acceptable for this application on your particular exterior finishes. And that kind of calmed him down because he's like, okay, well, it's supposed to be per the manufacturer's can.
Back to the education piece.
Right.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, I think there's assumptions being made. Had that been called out up front, though, he would say, hey, I don't believe in spraying. Had he stuck to his guns on that and said, no, I want a rolled application, we'd say, hey, that's a little bit more work or less work, and identify that up front. So the goal is number one, scope of work needs to be defined. And scope is not just do the thing, how we're doing it.
Yeah.
And, it's sort of like sometimes that's specified if you're doing a new build or something that's a part of an architectural team. You want a list of specifications. To what standard are we doing this?
I think that like how you're doing it is really important too. Obviously, it's important for the person that's getting the bid out, whether that's you as the business owner or estimator on your team, whoever that may be, the customer, obviously, but then also like for your crew after of like, hey, what actually are we doing? It's not wasting time. You know what I mean? Obviously it feels that way sometimes when we don't win every bid. You're like, man, I put a ton of effort into that bid and it, didn't go through. That is part of the game. We've had conversations about that of like, you got to have a healthy sales pipeline. That's another topic for another day. But I think that work is not wasted once the job's done because your team needs the scope too. They need hey, how am I actually installing this? How am I actually applying this? Am I using nails or screws? So I think that level of detail, it saves the rework down the road too.
So good. Yeah. Another key piece of this is going to be the quality of work. And we had an episode on this recently where quality is often arbitrary of just like when we say it's done, it's done.
Yeah.
And if you can get more than that specified into your documents before you even sell the job, and you guys can template this as well of just like, this is the typical standard for if you're a drywall contractor and you say typically level 4 smooth finish is what you get.
Yep.
Or this is the type of textures that are typical. And if you want more than that, you pay more. If you want less than that, you pay less.
Yeah.
But this is the typical, and you specify that. And I think no matter what trade you're in, there are ways of specifying quality.
Yeah.
when it comes down to in a workmanlike manner with these type of tolerances. We talked about tile specifications, how flat should the floor be, what's the spacing, what are we building here? You'll see this on automotive type parts where the requirements are to a certain, within 1/1000th of an inch or 2/1000ths of an inch. Like, what are the requirements here? It matters.
It does matter.
And I think if somebody's grading you, like, you want to know what you're getting graded against. So when you say you're done and the customer says, no, you're not, we're saying, here's the source of truth document. Let's look at the scope. Let's look at the quality standards as defined. And these are the things that really matter.
Yeah, absolutely.
The materials being used, this really matters as well. And if you can narrow that down ahead of time, where you're saying this specific material installed with this scope, this quality of work, you've got some really solid details right out of the gate, which makes so much more of the downstream effect of this really important, really easy, or easier. Let's put it that way. Yeah,
I'd say also a lot more specific in terms of like holding to the bid as well. If you have the actual selections defined early, I can't remember which episode we talked about, just understanding the full scope before you even go to bidding. But I think that's a piece as well, is like, hey, the more detail you can have up front before you actually put the bid together, the less potential for change later.
Yes. Yep. There are variations that matter so much on product selections. I mean, I can think of so many examples of that. Deck products, if you're putting in, an Ipe type of material, super hard, we're going to be going through saw blades like crazy, drill bits. I mean, that's an install method. That's that's a type of product that's going to cost way more than, say, treated decking.
Right. Yep.
It's wood.
Yeah.
And obviously the material costs 10x more or whatever it is. So there's an aspect of obviously hard cost of material, but also the impact of material. On your labor as well. Yep. The same thing where you can nail down brands and model numbers, where typically we use this Panasonic brand ERV or whatever it is. And then when somebody says, hey, I found this other one that you've never heard of before, and they say, hey, can you put that in for me? You say, well, yeah, we can, but we've never used that brand before. Yeah. And so therefore the cost is, we need to learn how to use it. We need to look at the specifications, how to use it. We need to make sure we do it right. So it's warranted. Yep. And so those are costs. Yep. And so if it's all defined up front, and if there's a change from it, there's a change.
Yep. And you and your customer on the same playing field.
So, and then going back to the specification sheet being really important. If you don't have a specification, it's willy-nilly. It's willy-nilly. Yeah. It's kind of like a hopefully it works out. Yeah. And it's difficult to have specifications, but if you don't have them, put them in your document. So at least you have some basics of saying, this is how we're going to do it. And we'll get some more specifics later, which I'm excited about. Yeah. That's good. We get rid of the ambiguity. We have the scope defined. We have the quality of work defined. Yeah. We know exactly. And I think the other pieces would be kind of auxiliary to that, of like, when are you starting?
Yeah, schedule type.
Yes. Yeah. What's the timeline for doing this? And I think another call out too is who's doing the work.
Mm-hmm. You call that out in a bid, is what you're saying.
Yeah, just to let your customer know, hey, we're doing the trim part internally. We're going to hire out the plumbing. Okay. Those kinds of things. It's helpful to know of like, we're bringing other people into your home. Yep. That we typically work with.
It's kind of a respectful thing.
Yes,
too,
it is. It is respect. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
So I think those are the essential, no matter if you're remodeling or if you're a trade contractor or you're a GC. I think these are the essentials that we can start with. So now that we got like all on the same page.
Yeah. Now we introed.
I said 3 minutes. That's probably like, 13. But anyway, here we go. I think there's some shared perspectives here we want to talk about. It's kind of like, you want to figure out what the customer expects from you. Yeah. Like, what do they want out of something?
What do they care about?
Yes. Mm-hmm. So sometimes they're kicking the tires. They're just shopping around. they're just looking for price. People are very clever about how they word that, though. Oh, well, we'd like to get this done. We've been thinking about it for a while. You can kind of, and then some things sound very similar to other conversations you had before, and they're not always the same. I mean, how many of you guys have had somebody you feel like they're just kicking the tires, next thing you know, they're signing up a $200,000 job? Yeah. I had one bid like that where, I was like, there's just no way we're winning that thing. Send it over to them. Yep, when can we start? I'm like, wow. Okay.
I guess.
So I guess, we'll get going then. I'm thinking there's no way. The bid's high. He's going to have some reason why he doesn't want it. But one thing I've learned over the years is that some pre-qualification things really weigh into this heavily. So understanding the customer expectations right up front is so crucial. Understanding their budget, which is kind of like this closely held secret of like, customers feel like if they tell you what they're expecting to pay, that you'll just manipulate that. Mm-hmm. but I think people need to understand there are so many variables,
Yes.
and this is your job to educate on
Yep,
all kinds of
absolutely.
levels of being like, and you can go down to basics, guys, with this and say, hey, when I talk about budget, the reason why I ask is because if we're doing flooring,
Yes.
there's grades of flooring down to $1.99 a square foot
Mhm.
or hundreds of dollars per square foot
Yeah.
for a particular product. The cost range is limitless.
Yes.
Labor involved with doing things. So all we're trying to gauge with the budget is we're having an expectation right out of the gate that we're the guys to do this job for you. They need to understand this is not Walmart where you're going and picking pencils out.
Yes.
When you're saying, hey, those number 2 pencils.
Or you need to understand that as the contractor if that's what they're looking for.
Good point.
And then they're an unqualified job at that point.
Yes.
If you're not willing to do that type of work.
Yeah, I had somebody contact me one time and say, hey, can you remodel our kitchen? And I didn't ask any qualified questions, but he had said something along the lines of, we need this done and we're going to flip the house. And I thought, clue.
Yep.
And next thing you know, I give him a general price for it. And he's like, whoa, I can get kitchen done for $2,000. And I'm like $2,000? You can't even buy the cabinets for that or the handles.
Who's the guy that's doing the labor? I'll hire him.
Yeah. I was like, nah, probably not. Yeah.
Maybe not.
We found this guy under a cardboard box. He said he'd do, he put cabinets in. So we're clearly on completely different wavelengths. A mentor of mine, he would come into a job and try to scare the customer off, almost being like, hey, when we do a kitchen, it costs $150,000. And he knew that was his typical range. And if somebody was still talking to him after that, then he said, okay, well,
They're qualified.
They might be qualified.
Yeah, it might be qualified, yeah.
And that might be totally off.
I think the budget thing is a really great call out because it's a scary question, I think, for a lot of people to ask because it feels like almost invasive or it feels like a private thing. You know what I mean? But it's like
we're not telling you how much money we have.
Yeah, exactly. It does. It kind of feels that way. And from the contractor's perspective too, I think it feels that way. I sold a lot of websites back in the day. And a lot of times like the budget side, it's basically like remodeling a house, but you're building a website online. You know what I mean? Like it's easier now because of AI, things like that. But the quality, what's going into it, how many pages are we built, those kinds of things, it relates so closely to construction. So what I tried to do, I think everything you just mentioned in regards to like getting to the budget, educating on why you need to know the budget or how it helps you help them, is key. And then I think if you're afraid to ask for like a single number, you can always be like, hey, can you give me like some kind of range as well? Like, hey, we're looking at 100 to 150. You know what I mean? I know that still varies a lot in terms of the, quality of products, materials, things like that you can actually do with a job, but it still gets you in the ballpark of like, okay, now we can continue the conversation.
I like the range. Yeah. There's been many times when we've had people with bottom line, hey, we can't spend more than 50,000 that spend 75, 80. Yeah. It's funny how that happens. People want what they want.
Yep.
The budget does kind of give you a baseline to let them know what they can get for their money
For sure.
and to make sure that you're even in the running with them for kind of anything close.
Yeah.
We've had a couple of projects where the budget number is so far off that you just say, well, you'd like 2 bathrooms done and your kitchen for the cost of 1 bathroom. And so, just to kind of educate them. And if they're like, whoa, we had no idea, then you say, you guys can part ways without putting any more time into it.
Yep.
So just, qualifying people on that. I think also a question that gets missed too is, what do you want this to look like when you're done? I had this happen recently with somebody that we had a different expectation. He had a different expectation of what the outcome should look like than I did. And fantastic guy, good friend, and he wanted to do right by me, but his expectation of what he thought I wanted was different from what I wanted. And that happens.
Yeah.
But I think where we clear that up is being very explicit up front and saying, hey, what do you want this to look like when you're done? It's a great question to ask people. Like, what's the outcome here? Do you want a showpiece here? Do you want this kitchen to be like people come here and they say, wow, that thing is incredible.
Yeah.
Like, or do you just say, I want a functional kitchen. I just get stuff done. And, like, what are we looking for here?
Big difference.
It's a big difference.
Yeah. Another quick one would just be, how'd you hear about us, right? Like if it's a referral from a previous customer or something like that, you obviously have their job to gauge kind of like what is it that they're looking at, or what's their reference. You have that if it's a past customer and those kinds of things.
And
as
no
well,
doubt they could ask personal questions like, how much did you pay for this, if you don't mind my asking?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
And it's great.
And they see the level of quality, ththose kinds of things. So you have a certain idea of like what they're looking for.
The things that matter to that person might likely matter to the person that you got the referral from, or the referred to.
Could not an exact science, but is a good indicator.
Yeah. Another qualifying question is the timeline. So many people are like, I need this done yesterday. And like right out of the gate, you're saying we're out 6 months. Like calling that right out up front is really important because then you realize we're not your guy. I had somebody where I had a more urgent issue to get done, and he's, hey, I can't get to it this week, and so I found somebody else. Like it's just helpful to know, like, hey,
Totally.
it didn't matter to him. He's busy. Like there's no point beating around the bush of even him going to the trouble of giving me a price for something he can't do.
Right. Yep.
And so like get that out of the way right at the beginning. So timeline.
Don't waste your time on bidding. Yeah.
Yep. And so before you even continue, like are those 3 things defined?
That's good.
Do you have a budget? Is the quality expectation defined? Mm-hmm. And can you deliver in their timeline?
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah. And if that doesn't happen, or if that can't happen, like if you can't deliver on those 3 things, then this is not your job. You're disqualified.
Yep.
I think there's an educational aspect of this as well. We brought up, but just making sure that you recognize that when people are way off on what their expectations are, do you kindly educate them on, well, for things in this price range and this quality level, or I'm sorry, for this quality level, this price range, for this timeline, et cetera, and so forth, so on and so forth. Yeah, where you're coming alongside as the kind educator.
For sure. Well, and you have to be educated to educate them. So
wow.
make sure you are.
Yeah.
It's good.
So now the question is,
what's the right approach? Like how do I actually achieve, a lot more like what we're talking about? How do I actually get to that point?
Okay.
Right?
So now the meat of the episode is what it's all about, guys. So it's the number one thing that really, if we could stress anything, is you need a source of truth when you're in the process of bidding out a project. Mm-hmm. And it seems quite obvious, but a lot of times the source of truth is, Kinsey, you want your bathroom done. I'm going to be your contractor.
Yep.
And the source of truth is you. And you're going to say, hey, this is what I'd like done. This is how it should look like, and so on and so forth. But is the source of truth a variable? Because it's just conversational. Yeah. And most people, if you have a good memory, but most people are kind of like, it evolves. And it'd be like, if it's conversational. I thought we had talked about doing a new bathroom fan while we're at it. And I thought we were talking about under cabinet lighting. And you know what I mean? Like and it could be in somebody's head. Yes. And that's not a source of truth. That's sort of just a casual conversation. Mm-hmm. So at a minimum, you need to define all of this stuff. You need to have it listed somewhere. Yeah, that's good. I highly recommend, if you guys are doing remodels, to put a little bit of effort into a sketch, a plan, something as a source of truth of like, this is the floor plan, these are where the walls go, this is where things lay out at a minimum, a 2D plan. Save you time later. Yeah, and then Jason is a selection sheet of these are the finishes and selections being installed. This is the tub, this is the toilet, this is the vanity. Yep. Involve the customer in those decisions because it matters. What kind of is this a floating vanity? Where does all the plumbing go? Yep. Where's the toilet go? I mean, if you have to move pipes, it matters. Yep. So you guys get it, right? I mean, there's having all of that stuff defined. So the source of truth needs to be more than conversational. That's good. And if it starts with conversation, it's documented. And so I think you're in danger of proceeding if you don't have a source of truth. Step one, make sure you have a source of truth. Yeah. Well documented, well defined, and agreed upon. Yep. Like, this is what we're working from as a source of truth. A lot of times, guys, this is plans and specifications. Those are your go-to. Yeah. Be careful with plans, though, because there can be revisions. Sure. And so when you're saying, hey, revision 1.3, dated this date, that's your source of truth for your bid document. Yeah. That's just, on your line items of saying per plan, dated this date, or per this revision. Yes. So something doesn't change on you. Like, we added another 100 square feet. Yeah. Did you know? It's important. Yeah. So those kinds of things really matter. So number one, we have a source of truth. Number two, we need detail. Mm-hmm. And we're talking about kind of like details, like don't break down a bid kind of a thing. But I think this kind of detail is back to what we're talking about earlier with the scope of work and the quality of work. That's the detail we're talking about. Yeah. So we need detail, but it also needs to be within the specifications. It needs to be within the source of truth. Let's say, for instance, you have a scenario in which something is not defined. This kind of is the highlighting ambiguity. It's the third point. Yeah. So it's being able to call out saying, we don't know what tile you're going to put on the floor. Yep. So we're going to leave a placeholder in there saying typically, or this is our placeholder tile, or to be determined. Yes. So we're leaving things out. We're basically calling out big neon lights around things that we don't know. That are unknown. Yeah. Yeah. And that way people say, well, I don't, instead of just throwing numbers at it and figuring it out later, which so many people are tempted to do, just try to win a job of like, hey, that's $1 a foot. And then later it's $10 a foot. Yeah. Well, and if you're doing that kind of thing, make sure it's an allowance, make sure it's super clear neon light, like what you're talking about. Make sure it's like hey, here's our list of allowances. Mm-hmm. We're saying it's going to be $2 a square foot or, $10 a square foot, whatever the allowance is, so that you can proceed on the bid side. It's still ambiguity though. Like that is something that can still change, hence the whole allowance. I'm glad you brought up allowances, and I highly recommend diving into allowances more, guys, because they are great budget placeholders of saying, hey, we allowed $3 a foot for the tile, and if it's 6, you owe us $3 a square foot more.
Yes.
Or if it's 6 you allowed and it's 3, we'll give you the credit.
Clarity.
So it's a nice way of getting bids out with precision
And
without
speed.
the work.
Yeah, exactly.
Precision and speed.
Yeah.
There's a temptation for us, you guys, some of you guys are really detail oriented, and you're going to put levels of detail into a bid that they really don't exist. You made it up. So like, for instance, we're going to do this to this quality level, and the customer's not really holding you to that. Or you have this, or it's a sales tool of like precision. We're going to do a nice cleanup job and set up and tear down. You're using this as a sales tool. Yeah. And then when somebody sticks you with it and say, man, I thought there wasn't going to be any dust in this place. Look at this, trashed. And now you're cleaning their house for free instead of being like, remodel sucks. Like we're going to put up plastic barriers. We're going to run air scrubbers, and that's what we're doing. Yeah. And if air leaks out, if dust leaks out into the air, like that's what's going to happen. This is a remodel. We can't contain it all. So I think don't put more detail in than you're actually going to hold. Yeah. And don't ask me how I know that.
It doesn't sound like there's any trauma there.
Yeah, no trauma at all. Yeah. To try to like let people know. And the other thing is like, are you capable of delivering it? Like, can your team uphold that standard? And that's been my problem too. In some jobs where I sell something my team can't deliver, and that just sucks so bad.
Hard.
So yeah.
I think another thing with the ambiguity thing before we move on to like point 4 is just the exclusions side of things. We talk about that, or we've talked about that quite a bit as well. Of like, if it's like what you're saying, we're not going to clean your house at the end of the job. Things like that. Like exclude things from the scope or from the bid. Like make very clear exclusions. This is not included in your bid. So that way, whenever they come back at the end of the project and they're like, well, what about the fan that needs
There's never a
installed?
question.
Yeah, exactly. It's just super clear up front. I think same thing with like, if you're a contractor who's building fence, like, hey, we're not actually going to stain this fence. That's it's a big difference in the like finish, of the job. So it's like, make sure that's called out clearly.
I like that. You might also call out any auxiliary impact of the exclusion, like one of them being, we're not going to do this, and that also could impact, like for instance, customers going to do this themselves, but that impacts the warranty on something else. Customers going to install their own plumbing system. Well, if you're in a jurisdiction where a customer can do that, but at the same time you're saying, well, there could be auxiliary impact to that. That could leak on the floors we just put in. So, maybe kind of calling out some of that piece of it. And sometimes customers look at that and say, whoa, that's bold language to have in here. Like, I don't want to take on that kind of risk. Go do it yourself. Make sure you kind of like call out the ramifications for that. Or, this is a great area for even AI to look in and say, what are the ramifications of having a customer do this themselves? Because sometimes it's not always apparent.
It's good.
So it's a good use for AI. So we got ambiguity highlighted, exclusions, great points.
Yep.
When it comes down to breakdown, I think the gold standard is buckets or category. Basically, you want to have categories like framing that have a budget number to them.
Trade, for example.
Yeah, like use it by a trade. Sometimes you can do this by a room on certain remodel contexts of like, this is the bathroom, this is the kitchen. And sometimes there's connection between the two. And so it's harder. It's more easy to just do it by trade of like, hey, so much drywall is going on. We don't know where it's actually being done, but this is the drywall category. Yeah. So I think we need to make sure that instead of like, hey, this one specific line item of framing that one wall is $112, like it's a Xactimate kind of insurance job. Right. Where you're like, I had one that was like $2.04 for this, and I'm like, I have no idea what that cost $2 $2 or $20. I'll let you guys. I looked at the aggregate though. Hey, the painting is $9,000. Yeah, I can paint a house for $9,000.
Yeah, I like that when you're saying breaking it down by category. I guess my question to that would be like, okay, if I am a framing carpenter or a framing contractor or a painter or whatever, would you break that down as well by like, let's just say interior, exterior, things like that? Like if you're a single trade or a couple trades, would you also break that level of detail down, or would you keep it a little bit more?
Probably keep it. And it depends on who you're working for. But I think if you have the scope of work and the quality of work defined, that those intermediary numbers matter less. Yeah. Because I think, I think this really just goes right into our next point is really what you focus on becomes the focus of your customer. Yeah. And so if your bid is heavy on numbers, that becomes the focus. And so it's funny how this works. In fact, I'll just use myself as an example. Somebody had sent me a bid and put in 20,142 square feet in there. And I thought, first question in my mind was, is that the number? That was the number one thing he thought, like he said, we're going to, seed your grass and this is how many square feet you have. And I'm like, man, that seems high. I don't think I have that many square feet. That's what he's educating me. That's what he wants me to look at is how many square feet and what's the cost per square foot. Now, if he came back and said, we're doing this area and the defined, scope as opposed to square footage. And I get sometimes you need to put square footages on some things. And I'm not knocking that entirely.
Yeah.
But I think the preferred approach to it would be something like, if you have a source of truth, and if you're putting flooring in, instead of saying something like 1,157 square feet of flooring at, $3.12 a square foot, it would be more like install the flooring in the family room per plan. With this type of flooring at this quality level and, these tolerances. And now we're saying, yeah, that's what I want done. So now what your customer's now looking at is instead of like $3.12 a foot, they're looking at, how's he doing that again? What's he doing it? Where's he doing that? And so you're educating what your customer to look at. This is a presentation.
Right.
Bids are presentations. They're not budgets.
Right. That's good.
And so you want to be able to see them the category. My flooring is going to cost me $12,000 and why?
I can also see a little bit of advantage of having the measurement though. In terms of like, let's just say, you measured wrong or something, like, hey, actually in the bid was this, but it turns out it was 1,500 instead of 1,200. Like you need a change order for that too. So it's like, I don't know. It seems like there's maybe a balance in sharing measurements like that matter.
Yeah.
And not, I don't know. What are your
I know
thoughts
in
on
our
that?
app, we allow people to display the unit price. And I mean, like obviously you can customize however you want to, but like one of the common approaches people use is a lot of times not showing the dollar amount, it's showing the quantity.
Yeah, I got you.
Installing, the flooring and this quantity.
Yes.
I think the thing I want to call out there is not so much that that's a bad approach, but the thing that should be the focus is what's being done and how it's being done to what quality. And because now the focus is less on the numbers.
Makes sense.
And when it's fixed bid particularly, the numbers are less relevant because, somebody come back later and said, well, you're putting the family room floor down and you measured wrong. I mean, whose fault is that? And hard to argue that. Hard to argue. But put the focus on the thing that really matters. And I think that's the thing of like, and that's what matters to both parties. That's what matters to you as a contractor. And that's what matters to your customer is what's being done, how's it being done. And the price is just being like, well, we agreed upon that as an exchange of services. Like, it becomes a good, kind of like focus on the things that matter. So
I like that.
I think the other thing that's been profoundly helpful for me is to think of bids as like a checklist, as a list of tasks being done. And so you have categories at sort of a top level of like demolition. This is my category. And then I have all these tasks. We're going to take out this wall. This is a load bearing wall. This is a partition wall. This is, the flooring. This is the soffits and, whatever else we're taking out. And now they're remember you mentioned earlier about, your team doing the work as well. Now they have something to reference of like, do this, do that. And then there's subtasks as well of like, auxiliary things, set up, tear down, clean up, all of these things related to it. I think if you think of your bid that way, it does a couple things. Number one, it's the source of truth. Of like this is the process, but also helps you think in a linear way of like step number one, I'm going to do the demolition. First step, we're going to go ahead and make sure the floors are protected. If they're staying. Number two, we're taking out that load bearing wall. Side point, I need to make sure I have support before we take out a load bearing wall.
Nice.
So we're building a temporary wall to hold the load.
Helps you think through the project.
Exactly. And next thing you know, step by step, right down the line. So think of your bid as a checklist.
That's good.
And then I think it's like, that top level trade, task, subtask.
Yep.
And it helps you downstream too.
I love it.
So now that we have like kind of arriving at, and there's so much more we can go into here, but obviously we're trying to keep this succinct and also digestible.
Yeah. Hopefully it is.
Like, wow. Just talked, we covered a lot here today.
Yeah, we did.
We need to set expectations with our customers at the very first meeting, essentially, of this. We're going to make sure that the scope is so well nailed down. And if we can't do the job. That anything beyond that, either more or less, is a change order. So I have made so many errors when I put myself in a position where change orders didn't happen. And the most ungrateful, pain in the rear, worst customers have been customers that I bent over or did the most for.
Yeah.
And I don't say that with any kind of bitterness towards them.
Yeah.
I think it was something I created because
You
I
let it
created an
happen.
expectation that I'm a doormat that you can go walk on. And
I'm a nice guy. I want to make it
I'll
right.
cover for
I want it to be
you.
great.
Apparently, I'm just loaded with money because I can just do things for free. I'm cleaning up on their job. Apparently, that's the mentality I give them, by doing all this stuff. And they don't know I'm broke. I'm not making any money in this job, working around the clock, staying up at night,
Yeah.
So, and neither do they care.
Right.
And back to what we talked about. And that's not their concern. I want my job done. You're the professional. Go and do it.
Yeah. You're responsible for that.
Exactly. This is your thing. Yeah. So the expectation for your customer is right up front of like, there's no freebies, there's no handouts, there's not in a negative way, but just being like, we're going to, anything that deviates from this from this document will be a change order.
Yeah. Well, just setting those expectations up front so that it's an easy conversation when it happens.
Yep.
Hey, we're doing a remodel. When we do remodels, we find a lot of stuff.
Yep.
I don't know how the last contractor did this. Those are some unknowns. Calling out.
If we
those
open up a
things.
wall and we find a duct in it that wasn't expected, well, we're gonna have to charge you to relocate the duct.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
good.
and
No,
if
but
you
that's education.
Yes.
And it's setting expectations so that it's not a surprise and they don't feel like they're getting taken advantage of.
Yeah. We didn't factor any rotten floor in this job. When you talked about exclusions, it'd be like, that's kind of one of those things to call out sometimes.
Yeah.
If you're a roofing contractor, you call in and say, we're not changing any sheeting as an exclusion.
Yeah.
Or you factored in some sheeting being changed. And
Right.
then there was parameters around it. Hey, we
Yeah.
will change up to 32 square feet of rotten sheeting.
That's good.
And if it's there, we'll change it. If it's not there, if it's more, we charge you more for it. So, it's a clean way of doing business.
Yep.
Boundaries are so crucial in
Yeah.
life,
Yeah.
but particularly with customers.
Yeah, I love it.
Just walk all over you if you don't have them.
For sure. Yeah, I think with, that was obviously a lot of detail. And I think, we had like 7 steps, right? Like, hey, here's how
Not
we
long
think
at
you
all.
should
Yeah.
present,
Mhm.
your bids so that way, I guess one highlight would be like, you need to have the breakdown internally to your bid. You need to know exactly the cost, like what it's going to cost you as the contractor. So it's like, in terms of like this generic statement, never break down a bid for your customer is the caveat, right? Like you have to have that internally so that way you can actually know you're covered, right? And be bidding a job that you're actually going to make a profit.
So there's
on
an
and
element
money
of that we agree with and disagree with. And
Yeah.
I think this don't break down the bid is going to be, well, when it comes down to this minute, like dollars and cents type of picture, that doesn't actually make sense because now you're putting the focus on the $12.89 line item as opposed to being like, I did the job that you needed me to do with the quality you expected. So I think having a source of truth, having it detailed, highlighting the ambiguities, I mean, like these things really, really matter.
For
I
sure.
mean, I think it's just, we're training customers along the way as well. Yeah.
So more words, less numbers is the
Yes.
idea, right? Like how we're going to do it, what's being done, less quantities and cost per unit type pricing.
The hero that you will be with customers when you use that approach is phenomenal as well, because people look at you saying, wow, this guy's paying attention to the details. And now he knows how that thing sums up to something.
Yep.
And now if you find a customer that says, hey, I want the detailed breakdown, that's not the thing you should be providing, except for situations where your cost plus business model, where then you need a budget to go off of too. But that's a different document. It's a budget saying here's the estimated cost, here's the actuals, and we reconcile the two.
Yeah.
And when it comes down to, we break that down. Hey, the plumber came in at this. He estimated that. He came in more. He came in less. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Never comes in less. But
But if you're doing fixed bid, that's kind of what we're speaking to.
yeah,
today.
fixed bid. We need a combination of both.
That's good.
I think the universal truths are you need to make money. This is not a charity. Boy, I should have discovered that faster.
Everybody's like,
oh, man. Is it though? No, exactly. Aren't we really charities? Just kind of dressed up like contractors. Yeah. I just feel like there's a lot of charity work going on. The customer needs to receive a fair value in exchange for their money.
Yeah.
And by fair, there's a lot of gray there, you know. But at the same time, you need to make a profit is the bottom line.
Yeah.
And that
Stay
should
in
be
business.
enough to cover the cost of new tools and, keeping a healthy business.
Keeping food on your table.
Yeah. And I think there's just this huge communication aspect of like defining expectations, defining all these things ahead of time. And I think when you take that approach, you come into jobs where people are excited about working with you. And at the tail end of it, there aren't any question marks.
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah.
It's good.
It's that simple, guys.
Feels like a mic drop moment.
Yeah. It's easier than you guys think, but harder in the sense of like there's some upfront cost to it.
For sure.
And I think
Takes a little bit of
that's the thing we just have to get adjust to. Use more pre-sale checklists, and save your work.
Yeah.
When you do when you know you just did that amazing job on that bid, save that one. Use that as a template for the next one.
Yeah. I think it's good. To summarize though, at the very end, the 7 steps that we kind of talked through, Go back and listen to it if you feel like you missed them. The source of truth, super important. Detail, super important. Highlight any ambiguity with the project. Use categories for your costs on your bids, group by framing, things like that.
As opposed to line items.
Exactly. Yep. You really set what matters on your bid. I think that was something that you hit on that's really good. It's like, hey, if you're highlighting the cost per unit or the square footage or something like that, your customer's going to care more about those things versus how it's being done, where it's being done,
And they're not mutually exclusive, meaning you can have both.
Yeah. Right. Think of your bid as a checklist, right? That helps your customer, and your field crew whenever you actually get to building the job, and then set expectations for things to change, right? Change orders. So it's good.
Hope that's helpful, guys. A lot of hard fought, painful lessons in that to get to that point. And we're still learning. There's still so much more to this, and love to get your feedback.
Yeah. We'll catch you guys next time.